Hey, I'm Noodle Yeti, and welcome to Westdale. We just finished learning a lot about this game through the guides and build for beginners. So I thought we'd see if we now have the skill set available to make a plan to fix this old city's problems. How do I plan on doing this? With 3 easy steps. Comparing our info views to our income and expenses, making a list of things that, at least I believe, should be changed and can be changed, and finally, following through. I do want to make sure you know this. We're not going to be following through today. Today's just all about the planning. We'll do that over the upcoming weeks, putting our skill sets to the test. For time's sake, I'll be skipping anything that I'm not going to be putting on the list today. However, from here, I believe that you'll be able to figure out the rest. If not, feel free to ask in the comments or go ahead and ask me on Discord from the link in the description below. The first thing I noticed when looking at our city services is how much we're spending. I think it's insane. I mean, I'm specifically talking here about electricity, water, fire, garbage, and medical and parks even. For reference, I'll toss up an image of Applegate's expenses up there. Although we do have to keep in mind that Westdale is ahead of Applegate in population by quite a bit. But I don't think that accounts for the sheer volume of difference here. Just looking at these expenses, this tells me that I have some serious work to do with balancing all of this. And I'll give you a couple examples here. I'm going to talk about medical since it has a capacity, as well as garbage since it has a processing rate and vehicles available. So if we come down here and we look at our current medical capacity, it's over 1,000 beds. Most of the time, we're not even using a single bed of that. Now, I should note, I believe if you play with disasters enabled, you might need the capacity for when one hits, and that's fine, but I play with mine either completely off or just above off, so that way just so that way I don't get anything like ridiculous all the time or too frequently, just a little bit of flavor while I play. But here, in this city, our capacity is ridiculously over. Personally, I think we could swap some of these, like... I forgot I renamed this to medical dispensary. It looks like they got rid of the green crosses on the front and replaced them with actual medical symbols. That's why I named it. Anyways, that's besides the point. I just forgot where I was. I think we can replace these medical clinics with some saunas. If we come down here, they cost about the same as a medical clinic. They do have less capacity on visitors and they don't have any ambulances, but what they do is they just boost the health value of the area around them. So I think these would be a good option to swap to. Now, if we choose to remove some of these medical clinics altogether instead of swapping them over to saunas in order to reduce the capacity and reduce our unnecessary spending, we will have to remember that it will lower some of the surrounding land value. So we're going to need to think about maybe some policies or some other things that we could put in their place in order to boost that back up again. However, when we look at garbage, this is where I can give you a tease of the expense to benefit ratio. Let me see if I can find one here. When we look at these recycling centers, this cost us about $240 per week, and in return gives us 15 garbage trucks and a processing rate of 24,000. Kind of decent. It's actually really decent. But if we compare that to what we currently have, which is these ones, the eco-friendly incinerator plants, these ones are costing us $800 a week. Just over triple. And they're only doubling our processing rate as well as our garbage truck capacity. We should note that it does also have zero pollution, while the recycling center has a little bit. But it does also increase in noise pollution and has some power output. But in the case of this city, I don't have any of these near citizens or anything like that. So it doesn't bother me to have a little bit of pollution. I just want to be able to reduce my expenses. So I think we should probably go with the recycling center here. By better managing the services provided, we'll begin to open up the gap between income and expenses, creating not just a healthier city, but a thriving city, capable of tackling whatever challenges it faces. My personal plan for this is to take a look at all the available options, comparing the volume of services provided to the impact on our expenses. Next, I will consider the original goals of the city, and, well, I don't want to pick an option that the city itself wouldn't align with. Oh, and I'm also going to be applying some policies throughout the city just to reduce the need for some of these services, as well as for land value. Both of those will cost us money, but I think in the long run, it'll help us earn even more. The next thing that blew my mind was the expense of our industry areas over there. I was dumbfounded, especially when comparing to Applegate's $16,000 in expense for it. This is quite the difference. However, we can't just take one thing out of context. Westdale also has a much larger industrial area, both in income and in profit margin. I actually think I have the income covered, so if I move my camera up there, you could see that we are earning quite a bit of profit there. It's like 30, 40, 50,000 or so. So it's no surprise to me that the expenses are where they're at. Next, let's go ahead and open up the city's import view. And ignoring the importing of ore and oil, simply because that's just how Westdale's set up, we can come over here to the harbor here to our generic industry, and we can see that we're importing specialized resources. So we're importing these things, so we're importing the raw resources, we're not turning them into what we need, and so the rest of our industry has to import that. That's quite a bit of excessive traffic that we just don't need. If we swap to our export view, on top of exporting a lot of commercial goods, you can see that we're exporting a lot of the raw resource of fish, as well as, if we come over here, a lot of the specialized industry for agriculture and forestry. Sure, exporting this stuff does increase our income, but it's not to the fullest extent. And finally, if we go to our industry area's budget panel itself, we will see that actually its largest expense comes from unique factories and warehouses. My personal plan for this is to balance each step in the chain while also cutting back on warehouse spending. Sure, each type of warehouse is vital to a smooth flowing industrial chain. However, given the size of our current industry areas, as well as our plan to reduce certain things and maximize certain things, I bet we can reduce all of those imports and exports while still improving the traffic flow, even if we're cutting down on warehousing. To finish the supply chain, let's look at tourism and commercial. I can't be too harsh on myself here, as one, hotels had just released, so I didn't quite understand them or even how to implement them. Two, I also didn't understand how commercial worked as the middleman between industry and tourism. So yet again, let's not be too harsh on ourselves and just think about what we can do to move forward. If we open up our city's tourism panel, you can see that we have quite the city attractiveness up there. In fact, I think that's actually over Applegate's or right at Applegate's. But yet somehow we have about half the tourists. That's a little confusing to me, but you know what? I'm sure as we start fixing things in the city and changing things, we might figure it out. Now, shifting to our budget panel, we can see that, holy cow, that this particular city is taking advantage of the airport's DLC for sure, and as well as the Park Life DLC. We are earning just a little bit of money from them. However, we are earning close to the absolute minimum when it comes to their spending within the city at hotels and commercial zones. Which actually transitions us into our next topic of this segment, commercial. We are earning a decent amount here, about 12, almost 13,000. And that's fine. That's barely behind Applegate's. But we can earn a lot more than this. Recalling from our industry segment with our imports view here, you can see that we're barely importing anything. And if we go to our exporting view, we are exporting a ton of commercial. This tells me that we have the resources available to apply the policies that double our commercial zone sales, which will then increase our tax revenue from them. There are some problems that might arise from that, such as not enough buyers for goods. But I think that when we attempt to fix the tourism right before that, it should fix that buyer's problem before we even get to it. Next, if we bring up our land value view here, you can see that this pedestrian area right here has insane land value, which means that we might be able to increase its taxing, or might increase their taxes beyond that 12% margin, up into probably about 14% or so. Yet again, just slightly increasing our commercial budget. The plan that I have for tourism and commercial essentially boils down to the following. 1, more hotels. Even if we have to demolish buildings in the process. It does kind of feel bad because when I was building Westdale, I didn't really want to destroy a whole lot of what I already put down in the process, but you know what? We have made mistakes and we're going to have to correct them. 2, we're going to be applying policies to increase both tourism and commercial zone sales, as well as maybe even their tax income. And 3, if the commercial zones lack customers, that's when I'd like to add in the unique buildings that bring in more, such as the City Arch, the Clock Tower, maybe the Sea Fortress, as well as, what is it? The Statue of Colossus that causes them to stay in the city for longer. This last segment is possibly the most difficult and time-consuming. Simply because I didn't design this particular city with effective public transportation in mind. I'm not going to take the time here to break down exactly what we'll need to do, but I will quickly remind us of what needs to be done here. According to our budget panel here, our transportation expenses are ludicrous. And it's not just our fancy fandangled airport. In fact, I bet if we moused over our profit, or as you saw from the tourism segment, it was a ton of income from it. So it's making its money back and more from its expenses. My best guess here is that we have a ton of unnecessary lines. So when we eventually get around to fixing this and changing this up, my plan will to keep these 3 basic principles in mind. Low density to low density, high density to high density, and tourism to tourism. I didn't expand on this much in any of the guides or the Applegate series. However, some policies potentially interact with this. Policies such as education boost, schools out, and industry 4.0. I don't believe there's any policies to reduce the educational requirements for offices, but that's all right. So just to remind you, I don't have a plan for this just yet. I think this is going to take a lot of thought, and I'd rather save that for another day. And there we have it, a somewhat fleshed out plan to go about fixing this old city. From reducing unnecessary spending to maximizing our profit margins. Now, to try and break this down simply, in case I didn't cover what it is you need to change, adjust what's being provided to match or slightly exceed what's needed. All depending on your city's story, of course. As you can see with Westdale, we chose to import ore and oil, so obviously we're not going to be adding in all of that raw resource production. And I think that's really pretty much about it for this video. Yeah. I'll kind of wrap up with some personal notes here. I'll be trying to do shorter, even a little bit heavier scripted videos. I don't want to say highly, but definitely adding more of it back into it. One, it takes less time to plan, takes less time to practice, and it takes less time to edit. And well, the reasoning for this is I'd actually like to put in a little bit of time to read and learn for things like screenwriting, fictional writing, as well as non-fictional writing. The reason is because I personally believe that it will have nothing but a positive impact for you as the viewer. Essentially better content for you is what I mean. You can kind of see back here, I have a few books. I literally just got them today. They all came in at the same time. They were supposed to come in on different days and different times, but for some reason, Amazon just shipped them all at once. But I've got a book called Save the Cat, Story, and On Writing Well. The first two, Save the Cat and Story, are about screenwriting, and the last one, On Writing Well, is about nonfiction writing. I thought I had ordered a book on fictional writing, but I guess I didn't. I don't know what happened, but I guess I'll have to order one of those as well. As far as those go, my choice for those particular ones, I saw a bunch of positive and a negative on each, as well as what situations some are good for. But I figure, you know what? Just read them and pick out what I can. Maybe I can apply a little bit of knowledge to these videos. Some of you actually know that I use AI to kind of teach me a little bit for script writing. I don't want to confuse you. I don't use it to write my scripts. I do all of the research. I do all of the rough draft. I do all the second drafts. And then I pass it to the AI and say, hey, grade my script. And pretty much, well, hold on. I essentially give it a prompt that says, you are my professor, or act like you are my professor, and you're grading my script here. I want you to tell me what I could do better, tell me what I could, and give me examples of what I can improve within my script. And then from there, I will change things, as well as sometimes it actually gives me a good example, and I'll just straight up put that in my script because it's like, it was good. So, or at least I thought it was good. You guys might not think it's good. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to be cutting down on the video lengths just to give myself a little bit more time to learn. So thank you for watching. Next, we're off to Applegate to devise a plan for the city's fans. Bye for now.